on camera.
One, two, one, two.
Bit different from the morning show now.
Much better.
Is social media helping or hindering public debate? Join me in welcoming our panel. Big round of applause, please. Bianca Hall, you've spent 14 years at Fairfax now. You've spent some time in the Canberra bubble. You're the city editor at The Age. Do you think that hashtag activism is achieving things or just making noise?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the movement. I think Arab Spring was something incredible. It threatened to bring down governments. It launched a democracy movement across the Middle East. And then you go to hashtag Ozpol, which is a lot of power and fury and noise and can be quite a bullying space for a lot of people, particularly women journalists and women activists and women politicians, as we've seen just recently. So I think social media and hashtag activism has the power to really generate positive social change. Black Lives Matter is garnering people from across the globe in support of positive social change. But I think it can also be a pretty dreary and petty place.
Yeah, most certainly. So Jacinta Parsons, so you've spent your working life as a broadcast radio journalist. So you've done the rounds, community radio, Double J, now at ABC 774.
Community radio represent.
Yeah, that's
R,
right.
bang.
Triple R as well.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, what are your thoughts? And we know that your passion is music and the arts. And if ever there are a couple of fields there filled with celebrities and huge social media muscle doing really nothing about funding or supporting their own sectors, where do you think those sectors are missing the opportunity?
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting point around the enormous grunt of power of community support audience that musicians and community have. And I think what the person that's interesting to reflect on in this way, if we go back to pre-internet life, is Michael Gadinski, of course, that we celebrated his life enormously yesterday, as he deserves to be celebrated. And what he did, I guess, is your pre-internet version of harnessing the collective power and using the collective power to lobby government for support and lobby community for support, and to create an identity or a brand. What do we say these days? I don't know. I'm innocent to these things. But to create a thing for Australian music that had previously not existed and there was a lot of pushback on. So I think if we use that as a model and as an idea around how that could be harnessed in our online worlds, I think it's interesting. We're the first industry out, we're the last back in, we're always the ones supporting everyone. That is the nature of the artist. How do we ensure that we are protected and respected for what we actually contribute to community? So there's definitely movements offline, but I think online, as you say, there is a missed opportunity for a collective power perhaps around ensuring longevity.
Brett McLeod started off at 3AW as a cadet, and I won't ask you how long ago.
Was within the last 4 decades.
Okay. You've been a Europe Coro, you're a regular face on our television screens at 9. Do you think this is about identity politics, really? That we're really into social when it's working for our views, but we absolutely hate it when it's not?
It definitely exacerbates that. That's the my tribe versus your tribe part of social media, which is really draining and depressing and kind of ends up going nowhere. And there were 2 hashtags which came up during the second lockdown, which anyone the only social media I'm on is Twitter, because all journalists kind of have to be on Twitter. And we have a love-hate relationship with it. We can't live with it, but can't live without it either. And during the second lockdown, there were 2 hashtags which showed these 2 tribes. One was Dictator Dan, and the other one was hashtag I'll stand with Dan. And depending on which story you were doing, you would be attacked by both hashtaggers for doing the same story. And to me, it just showed there was an interesting exercise, when it all started, I was sort of surprised. I was a bit taken aback by this because I've been used to being criticised on social media. But to be honest, most of it generally came, if I wrote anything about Donald Trump, you'd be attacked by people in America who had never heard of you. And generally from his political perspective. I was surprised by the attacks coming from supporters of Daniel Andrews, who I would actually differentiate from being necessarily Labor supporters. Not that they're mutually exclusive, but they were actually really supporting Daniel Andrews. And I started to get really surprised by some of the criticisms. And I thought, this is a new phenomenon. This is an example of my tribe versus your tribe. And any criticism of the people we identify within that tribe, you attack all of us. And I'm not a big fan of the term identity politics because I think that can reduce things too much when people have genuine complaints. It's like political correctness. It's can be a way of stifling debate. But in this case, I felt there was a tribalism that if you tried to break it down, if you tried to engage with it, you ended up going down a rabbit hole and getting stuck.
I think what happened during all those daily press conferences, and what was it, 110 days or something, was you saw the sausage factory in all its ugly machinery. A lot of the frustration, I think, was also being felt by the media because Dan Andrews is a skillful politician. Now, while he was leading us through the pandemic and people felt a passionate adherence to what he was saying and to Brett Sutton, you know, every day we'd see the same people, and we had to put our trust that these people were taking us through because we're all, you know, at home in our, like, isolated in our little rooms or homes or whatever, and putting faith and trust in the leader because you kind of have to in that situation, right? But he is a skillful politician. He does not answer a question. And so what we do in the sausage factory is try to come at it from a different way or ask it 3 different times. Hopefully, maybe the 5th time is asked the same question, he will give you a tiny bit of the answer, and then your colleague will come in and try to get a little bit more of it. So yeah, it's frustrating viewing, but that's kind of what a press conference is.
Press conferences became performative, both by the Premier, because that is what politicians do, but also, you know, there are elements of the media who knew they were on camera, this is their chance to get a question that was going to get, where it wasn't necessarily just about getting an answer, it was about getting a question in that didn't get an answer. And I found it quite extraordinary, even recently, when a journalist was criticised for turning up to a news conference and asking hard questions. And I'm talking about Lee Sales. And I thought, well, hang on. The questions he was asking, yes, a lot of them had been asked before, but by same token, hadn't necessarily got a direct answer before. And what's wrong with that? If it was asked of any other politician, would you be complaining? I thought she did a terrific job in very difficult circumstances. And I've seen other press conferences where people have asked really annoying questions. And I've been the journalist asking really annoying questions. I'm sure other people are rolling their eyes because that's the nature of journalism. But I've said to, I do a bit of work with journalism students at RMIT, and I said the one criticism that really bugged me, and it might seem odd, is when people on Twitter, because there's a live feed of people's criticisms on Twitter, would say, oh, that's such a dumb question. Why'd you ask that dumb question? And I always say to journalism students, there is no such thing as a dumb question.
You look at the news and you can see there's an agenda, the way it's presented, it's manufactured, it feels like you know what the ABC is going to say, you know what Channel 7 is going to say, you know what Sky is going to say, and there's obviously something going on at a higher level which dictates the way all the puppets perform. That's what it looks like.
No offense.
So I'm concerned. Sorry. I mean, we're all puppets. We're all puppets.
Time to wrap it up.
Sorry. Anyway, hopefully, look, this is my first stint in the media world, but
May as well go for a Gus.
yeah. Well, Tony's always told me just go for it. Don't worry about it. So I just don't know what the truth is, and people that I talk to, we're all saying the same thing.
It's a great thing for us to talk about because it's a great opportunity for me to sit here, look to you in the eyes, Gus, and say that editorial integrity is the cornerstone of the work that we do. It is so important that we are assessing agendas and looking at telling a story. That is the point. And especially when it comes to the day-to-day work of the ABC, what I do, there is no editorial oversight. We are independent. We are working independently to tell stories. You know, I spoke about Days of Our Lives today. I mean, come on. No, but there is no... it's really important that I think that the journalism is able to reclaim some of that misconception, I think, about this agenda stuff and where the truth is. What would you say?
Yeah, I think we're living through a time now where people choose their news sources based on their pre-existing ideas. And there is so much news around, and there's so many different sources, and there's a lot of questionable news sources around, that people collate things that reflect their own worldview and their own thinking, which is problematic. We, since Fairfax was taken over by Nine, frequently get the criticism that Peter Costello is telling us what to write, just like Rupert Murdoch is telling every single one of the many thousands of News Corp journalists what to write. He must be a busy man, that Rupert. Just like Jacinta said, we are not told what we can or can't write. The thing that probably constrains a lot of what we can do is defamation law, but that's something very different. We've been battling against that in our newsroom today. We do our best to, within the parameters that we have, to find out as much as we can and to tell the stories openly and honestly.
I guess I'd just add that you still have to try and differentiate. And I understand why there's confusion between those that report news and those that comment, and some overlap. That's a good point. But there are certain people whose job it is just to be a commentator. And so you would never confuse Andrew Bolt with a day-to-day journalist, for example. And he's got his agenda, he prosecutes it, and that's what he's paid for. Whereas those of us in day-to-day news, I've been in the business 38 years now, and I've worked at 3AW and I've worked at Nine, occasionally pop up in the ABC. I have never tell me anyone any political agenda, any party line to take. The only discussion we ever have, and it is a discussion, it's never a diktat, is what's the best angle on this story? And the example, I gave a talk to the shadow cabinet as it was then, which was Daniel Andrews' shadow cabinet. And it was just them, and it was really just to try and educate them about how the media works. I did make the same offer to the coalition cabinet as well, just in case I was being Sanders biased. But I said, you have to understand that we do occasionally, more than occasionally, report stories about people that we like, that are negative. And that is part of our job. I don't like doing it, you have to do it. I reported the Essendon drug scandal. I'm an Essendon fan. Yeah. That's what I mean about, you've got to forget about your tribe, you've got to park it. And I do think sometimes we are criticised for telling a story that the criticism comes from the eye of the beholder. Not to say certain organisations aren't skewed in one way, but I think television is the most massive mass media, so you can't afford to be too partisan in a commercial TV network and survive. And I'll just conclude by giving one example of how things have changed. Leslie Stahl, 60 Minutes journalist in America. She started her career in the early 70s as a television journalist. One of the first major stories she covered was the Watergate trials. And she said back then there were 3 TV networks, 6 o'clock every night. We all had pretty much the same story. That this is the set of facts, these are the most interesting parts of those facts, and this is what we'll come out with. And she was talking on the eve of the first trial of Donald J. Trump. And she said, now you can choose your own adventure. And you've got a whole network in Fox News, which is going to be obviously more biased. It's their business model. They're more biased towards Donald Trump. So those viewers will never be troubled by opposing views. And her point being that the spectrum has narrowed.
We get asked that a bit actually, seeing the rise of the right in the States, and with Sky Television, obviously the right here. I mean, how powerful could that get?
The way that we consume our media now online is designed to provide for us a flow of information that suits algorithmically what you want to have come up. And that is what you were mentioning, reduction of how we see and understand the world. That's frightening. That has been used by political agents for the benefit of, outcomes in elections or perceptions or whatever you want to say, I think is very concerning. And so I think that we still have media in this country that we need to be really serious about protecting and being very, very serious about not allowing off-the-cuff criticisms of it in, it's fake or it's whatever. I think it's really we need to take this really seriously.
I was just thinking, sort of just on a different tack, has social media changed news gathering? So obviously your business model's seriously disrupted, but there's never been more content. So what does it mean for your news gathering, Brett?
In some ways it helps, as in the past, if there was an event and you're looking for photographs of someone, someone that's gone missing in Nepal, you'd have to try and track down the family, see if they want to talk, see if they want to send a photo. Now people just put them out on Facebook and you've got images straight away. So in that sense, it does make our job a bit easier. There's a crash on the Westgate Freeway. 30 seconds later, someone's uploaded amazing pictures there that we used to have to pay $1,000 for. So that part is helpful, and also just being aware of news events happening. It's been good for that. The downside is ludicrous criticism, appalling comments, stuff from the generally anonymous people, which gets back to your point that yes, it would be nice if people had to put their names to it. I think it would be a very different thing.
But there's also the point during the Arab Spring, if people were putting their names to their tweets, they wouldn't have been around for very long. So there is an argument for being able to speak freely without fear of consequence.
Is social media, Bianca, helping or hindering public debate? It's a hard one, isn't it? You can just speak to all sides of this.
It's got, a beautiful way of bringing communities together and galvanising people and making people feel braver about being part of something. But I think, it can also be a pretty dreary and petty place, as I said earlier.
Say, for example, let's take Taylor Harris and the trolling that she received online, as do many female footballers online. That's in community. That's going on. That sort of thinking, that sort of behaviour, that's not happening because people are suddenly deciding that that's what is being felt. That's what women understand is actually going on. So when that becomes clear, we see that, then we have an opportunity again to shift culturally around that, to have a recognition of what's going on. Oh gosh, look at all the things that are going on in Canberra. You speak to 100% of women, they will tell you, yeah, hello, this has been going on forever. Because we don't see and we don't illuminate enough of this stuff, we don't necessarily find ways and pathways through. So I think, again, I want civil space, but the reality is that's got to happen beyond our online worlds as much as anywhere else.
Since we're into the bubble and what's happening with Morrison, like the bark's well, or the gloss is well and truly off him, does he get through this period?
I think it's fair to say that he will not come through unscathed, that this is incredibly damaging.
As a woman, as a human, I don't care about the political fallout. I want to know that we're going to actually make some significant change as a result of what it has exposed.
The worst side of the social media is actually uncovers things that would not be hidden away from daylight normally, and they're really ugly. But the exposure of them can actually possibly lead to changes for good.
What we're seeing in these ugly expositions is already occurring. Yeah.
But it's interesting, I mean, you make a really good point. Like, we're seeing this unfold in real time, whereas normally social change happens at a much more glacial pace. But there has been a lot of frustration among Australia's women particularly, but also, right-thinking men, good-thinking men, that this has been treated by the government, and particularly, I think, by the Prime Minister, as a political problem to be managed for quite some time, not recognising that this is a very real human problem that people want, solved.
And the irony will be the political management will be the undoing of the political management, because it's actually about, we want to see something beyond political management at this point, and I think that's the rub here.
Wow, we got there. And of course, huge thanks to our panel. They're here, they're not paid, they're generous, they're bright, they're leading journos, they're lovely people. Please give our team a big round of applause. Okay.
It's all right. They explained. That's helped so much. Thank you very much.
It has weaponised in some ways to the detriment of public civility.
It's a necessary evil.
Black Lives Matter and the Arab Spring have been fantastic.
For good or for bad is probably good on balance because everyone in that way has an equal say.
Both good and bad.